Project 2025 is a 920-page manifesto written by the ultra-conservative, far-right hate group known as the Heritage Foundation. You may have never heard of them, but they bring in a whopping $106 million per year and spend $93.7 million of those donations supporting far-right ideology. The Heritage Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means according to their IRS filings, they are not legally allowed to endorse any political candidate or party. And as you're going to see later in this episode, they very much do both of those things. So they're not legally allowed to do that, and you can report them to the IRS for doing so if you so choose. In fact, many of the anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation we've seen being proposed and passed across the United States over the past few years was not written by the legislators themselves, but by Heritage Foundation lawyers, or written by other groups and signed onto by the Heritage Foundation, before presenting those bills to far-right conservative members of Congress, who then introduced those bills into legislation word for word. These ideals include battling marriage equality so that gay people cannot be married, wanting to allow by law employers the right to discriminate openly against LGBTQ people in the workplace, ban our community from serving in the military, ban us from being members of the Boy Scouts, especially in positions of leadership, ban LGBTQ people from being parents, end healthcare for transgender youth, banning LGBTQ inclusive books, curriculum, and any books combating racism. And who could forget they want to ban anything that limits their ability to perform conversion therapy, which has been proven to push children to suicide, because in their view, they would rather these kids dead than being alive and gay or trans. The Project 2025 manifesto includes not only a desire to do all of those things, but an outline on how exactly they're going to do it. They're no longer saying the quiet part out loud. They're writing it down so that we can all read it clear as day, because these far-right individuals are so unafraid of us that they don't even care if they put it in writing for all of us to read. So why is it so important we talk about this right now? Well, firstly, you should know Project 2025 cost over $22 million to write and put out there. That's nearly a quarter of their 2023 income for the whole organization. And if one of the largest and most influential hate groups in America is spending nearly a quarter of their annual budget on one item, it's worth a minute or two to see what that item is. Secondly, former President and convicted felon Donald Trump has voiced his support for Project 2025, not just in speeches, but in his written post. And most importantly, on their website, the Heritage Foundation literally says openly in their 2023 annual report that, quote, Project 2025 is ahead of schedule. Another important note in this story is that earlier this week, the gay furry fandom community actually hacked into the Heritage Foundation website to find a lot of information out on them, which has been breaking in the news this week. So that's really interesting. We have always supported the gay furry fandom community on the show, partly because I am a member of the furry fandom myself, but mostly here they are just amazing people and we support them wholeheartedly. So one of the pieces of information that they actually found out was that on the back end of the Heritage Foundation website, it's actually owned by some Chinese Communist Party donors. And so that's very interesting to note here that the Chinese Communist Party is still trying to throw some discourse in America through the Heritage Foundation and this Project 2025 whole effort. After the hack happened, the Heritage Foundation responded by threatening the gay furry fandom community and saying that once they get back in power, they're going to arrest and imprison all of us for life. So that's pretty much fitting of the Heritage Foundation at this point to keep on brand with the Nazis and say they're going to round us up and imprison us for life. So just keep that in mind, that when they're met with any questions of their doings here or their business trading, they immediately go to threatening all of us to imprison us for life. Just keep that in mind. So when we're telling you that Project 2025 is dangerous, not only to the United States democracy, but to the world, especially those in any minority, including the LGBTQ community, please understand this is possibly the most pressing existential crisis we face right now. So as hard as it might be, we have to talk about it. On July 5th, 2024, Donald Trump wrote, quote, "I know nothing about Project 2025. I have no idea who is behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Anything they do, I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them." So he has no idea who they are or what they want to do, but Donald took the time to, quote, "wish them luck anyway," with, quote, "anything they do." And oddly in this statement, he's saying, quote, "some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal." If you truly know nothing about something, wouldn't you hold back your opinion on calling it partially or fully abysmal until you knew what it was for sure? So the truth is, Donald does know what Project 2025 is, and he only called certain parts abysmal, which means other parts are completely in line with what he agrees with. And because the Democrats cannot get their shit together long enough to realize an 81-year-old who we can all see has severe cognitive decline, and who 2/3 of Americans want to step out of the race right now because our literal democracy is on the line, Donald Trump is likely going to become president again, sadly. Unless by some miracle President Biden puts his country first and lets someone younger step in, like Kamala Harris, Josh Shapiro, or Pete Buttigieg, or someone else. Or by some miracle, enough Democrats show up to vote in November for a candidate even though they don't think that he can perform the job because the alternative is worse. By the way, for those of you not in the United States, it must have been fun watching this from the sidelines for about 2 decades now, where the Democrats' main campaign strategy seems to be, well, the other guy is worse than me, so vote for me. It's been the race to the bottom here, but we have been watching as the UK and France destroyed far-right ideology in their governments in this year's election, and here's hoping we can continue the trend of not allowing Nazis in our government. Side note here, did y'all see what happened in Nashville, Tennessee this month, where hundreds of Nazis and Patriot Front members took to the streets, yelling about how LGBTQ people are grooming children? Well, fun fact here, one of the Patriot Front leaders named Jared Boyce from Springville, Utah, just pled guilty this week to 9 felony charges of sexual exploitation of a minor for having child pornography on his personal computers. You know what? Jared was not a drag queen, nor were all of those 301 priests who a grand jury found used their positions of power to abuse over 1,000 children in 2018, and were routinely shuffled between parishes to avoid scrutiny. Not one of them were gay, lesbian, trans, or drag performers. So to all of the conservatives watching this episode looking for groomers and MAP members, your call is coming from inside the house. Anyway, it's worth taking a look at what Donald Trump supports, including Project 2025. And make no mistake, while he said he doesn't agree with all of it, he very much does support most of it. On his website, Donald Trump has pages dedicated to what he calls Agenda 47. These include videos of Trump himself calling for homeschooling your children free from the leftist ideology, quote, protecting students from the radical left and Marxist maniacs infecting educational institutions, ending regulatory oversight and compliance from organizations like the EPA, FDA, and more, and Trump's plan to, quote, protect children from the left-wing gender insanity. His words, not mine. You should know this Agenda 47 is almost verbatim from the Project 2025 manifesto. We found almost every Agenda 47 item also listed in the 920-page Project 2025 playbook. So what exactly does Project 2025 call for and outline how to do? Well, it calls for extreme power to be placed in the executive office or presidency, so they can operate with more autonomy without the votes of Congress or legal challenges from the judicial branch. Basically, there will be no more checks and balances to our government. Oh, and not to mention, it outlines how to go after the fourth branch of our democracy, the free press. On page 258, please note, as this story has been going viral, the Heritage Foundation actually went through their entire 920-page manifesto and mixed everything up to make it harder to find the exact pages where everything is on. So while we mention a certain page number in this episode, it might be somewhere else in the manifesto now in that 920 pages. They went through and basically took all the different bullet points and mix them around to make it harder to find, because all outstanding organizations try their best to hide things when their movement is going viral, right? It outlines how to dismantle any diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and specifically mentions a dismantling of any effort to stop bullying LGBTQ people. From here, it goes on a long rant outlining how to make straight marriage and relationships the only relationships that would remain legal. It states, quote, "Families are the basic unit of a foundation for a thriving society. Without women, there are no children and society cannot continue." On page 451, 200 pages later, they're still ranting about how terrible LGBTQ people are. They outline their main goals. Number 3 on that list, immediately after saying that the government should have the legal right to tell people what to do with their own bodies, is their goal of, quote, "promoting stable and flourishing married families." They go on to say, quote, "Families composed of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. In the context of current and emerging reproductive technologies, HHS policies should never place the desires of adults over the right of children to be raised by their biological fathers and mothers who conceive them." They took a whole page in their manifesto to outline not only that straight marriage should be the only thing allowed, but how to ensure it happens, and somehow found the time to insult gay people by implying we're pedophiles because it's the desires of adults over the rights of children. My husband and I are looking at adopting a child soon, and we'd be fantastic parents who love our child unconditionally. One of my favorite creators on TikTok, named Jake Dayton, who is a college administrator and has a husband who is a surgeon, just went through in vitro to have a child of their own, and he constantly makes videos of how much they love and care for their child. One of his recent videos even talked about how male restrooms don't normally have changing tables and rely on women to do all the hard work. Even if he were not gay, this puts a lot of work on the woman in the relationship and makes it difficult for him to change a baby in public. But adoption and in vitro are expensive, and let me be very clear. Adoption saves a child from a home that the court deemed unfit for them to grow up in, so their biological parents, as Heritage Foundation wants, are unfit to be parents. And a gay couple who love each other and would lay down their lives to protect that child and each other like my husband and I would, is somehow viewed horribly by this far-right hate group, enough to dedicate pages of their manifesto to ensuring gay people cannot adopt or do in vitro. On page 483, 30 pages later and they're still talking about us, what an honor. Project 2025's manifesto says that caregivers of elderly care facilities and nursing homes focus too much on providing care for racial and LGBTQ people. But as we've outlined on our show before, LGBTQ people are wildly discriminated against in elderly care facilities all the time, and their marriages and gender identities are routinely not respected by staff or administration during their final years of life. So the Heritage Foundation wants this discrimination to be expanded and continue. At this point, it should be abundantly clear that this Project 2025 manifesto reads like Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. You might think we're exaggerating here, but this manifesto literally outlines how to legally build camps to detain anyone suspected of illegal immigration and ripping apart families. Even if you agree that we have a crisis at our border and only those who come to America legally should be allowed in, the idea that those who don't follow the laws should be rounded up in what they literally call camps sounds very familiar to 1939 Germany. And remember, you're dealing with people who openly describe themselves as neo-Nazis, but the old Nazis didn't stop at rounding up one group of people. Their camps rounded up gay people and marked them with a pink triangle, where Nazi guards and fellow prisoners of the camps routinely abused wearers of the pink triangle, because even the other prisoners looked down on gay people. Then in July 1944, when those concentration camps started being liberated by Allied forces and all the other prisoners were set free, the Allied forces, including American troops, kept gay pink triangle wearers as prisoners until the early 1970s, more than 26 years later. So when a manifesto starts talking about rounding up people in camps and ripping apart families, we can hopefully all agree this sounds too much like Hitler's manifesto for any of us to feel comfortable. Both manifestos, by the way, include book banning, dismantling the Department of Education, and putting more guns in schools. We haven't even had time to cover how Project 2025 shows how to fire anyone who supports transgender people for their gender identity, gets rid of any basic healthcare for trans people, and pushes churches to take over education through school choice, where public funding and tax dollars would go right into the pocket of the Catholic Church, and parents would be able to deny their children any lesson if they are homophobic and transphobic. Nor did we mention the endless pages dedicated to rolling back the progress made on climate change, as we've all seen this summer get insanely hot. Project 2025's plan to get rid of the school lunch program because, in their view, children don't deserve one hot meal a day. Raising the retirement age, cutting Social Security, building a surveillance network to track people who go to the doctor for any healthcare needs, and more. All of these, by the way, are listed on Project 2025's manifesto and Donald Trump's Agenda 47. So it's not really a question if Donald Trump would implement Project 2025, but how soon once he gets in office. Another really important thing to note is that as people have been sharing things about Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation this week on Facebook especially, Facebook has been fact-checking them through what they call an independent resource. The independent source they're using is called The Dispatch, which is a news organization owned by the Heritage Foundation. So they've been literally using the Heritage Foundation websites to fact-check about the Heritage Foundation websites. And unsurprisingly here, a lot of the stories about Project 2025 have been suppressed on Facebook because of this, because Facebook considers them untrue, even though they are 100% true. At this point, you might be wondering if any of this is actually legal. Well, of course not, but who's going to stop them? Normally, that would be the checks and balances of the judicial branch or the Supreme Court. But sadly for all of us, 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices right now were nominated by Presidents George H.W. Bush Sr., George W. Bush Jr., and Donald Trump. But these 3 presidents didn't just pull their names from a hat and magically they're on the Supreme Court. The Heritage Foundation and other far-right groups handpicked these 6 names and presented them to both Bush presidents and Trump, so they can have an easier time finding someone to fill the spot on the court. All 6 of them were later nominated and confirmed to the court. And not only are all 6 of them current members of the Heritage Foundation, but the foundation regularly speaks highly of their decisions. And these 6 justices routinely to this day speak at Heritage Foundation events. There should be no doubt in anyone's mind at this point that they are still aligned with each other's values. And remember, almost a quarter of the Heritage Foundation funding last year went to Project 2025 and getting it off the ground. So it would be insane to think these 6 majority members of the court would stop anything from Project 2025 going forward, when they themselves have routinely supported every word inside the manifesto. So if the courts are not the answer, then what is? Well, Biden could pack the Supreme Court in what many feel would be his final year in office anyway. He could step aside for the good of the country and let anyone younger take the ticket and hopefully win. By some miracle, Democrats like myself who do not think that Biden is capable of holding the job for 4 more years could turn out to vote blue no matter who. But many Democrats don't like some of Biden's policies, and again, it seems to be the Democrats' official campaign strategy at this point to always be the candidate that everyone hates slightly less than the other guy. And that's not a reason to win the highest position of power in the country. You should be the best person for the job, not the guy that's slightly better than the worst. Most importantly, we need to remember this $22 million project is not going away tomorrow. Even if, by some miracle, the Democrats win and squash the hopes of implementing Project 2025 ideals in 2025, throughout the 920-page manifesto, it makes one thing very clear. They are more than ready to wait for their results. After reading this manifesto, nowhere in the book does it say things have to happen in 2025. The book title implies that year, but you'll notice every single agenda item and set of directions is worded to say, quote, the next conservative administration, meaning they can simply change the title to Project 2029 or 2023, etc. If you don't think conservatives can wait for a big payoff, or if you don't think they can be patient for the results of their hard work, look no further than Roe v. Wade. The original case happened in 1973, and conservatives back then put in place a long-term plan to replace justices on the Supreme Court until they had a majority. They never campaigned for the approval of the American public because our opinions didn't mean shit to them. Only the opinions of 9 people mattered to them. And now 49 years later in 2022, they overturned Roe. But most importantly here, in those 49 years, they worked tirelessly on not just the Supreme Court level, but on a local level in every state to get trigger laws in place so that when Roe eventually fell, some states would automatically have laws that would immediately go into place and ban abortion in that state. My point is, we need to look at Project 2025 as the biggest threat to democracy, minorities, freedom in general, and the world, because this is yet another act from the far right. But this time, they aren't afraid to put it all in writing for us to read. They are so confident that this plan will come true, maybe not in 2025, but someday soon, that they spent $22 million to put it in writing, fully knowing we can all read it for ourselves for free on their website. Just like in Nashville earlier this month, these Nazis are not afraid of going out in public and chanting these words with megaphones and 900-page manifestos. You and I can vote for who we believe will stop these far-right policies from ever coming true, but we need to get a larger Supreme Court, so it's not so easy or cheap for any group, no matter political party, to control the judicial branch. We need to vote up and down our ballot for candidates that will put a stop to this in Congress, both at the national level and the state level. And us LGBTQ people need to run for office ourselves. We need to stop putting our freedoms and equal rights in the hands of people who are using us time and again. Democrats have told us for generations that they have our backs and they'll put laws in place to protect us if only we vote for them back in office one more time. But I, for one, am tired of hearing the empty promises from people who are currently in office, even as President of the United States, saying that if they get reelected, they'll do something to help us at that point. But newsflash, they can do something right now, as we're facing the biggest threat to our freedoms in generations. If they really had our backs, they would have our backs right now. It's difficult to support a party that routinely uses us for votes with promises they never intended to keep. Their only hope is that we see what the other side is promising, and we fear what could happen so much that we vote for the Democrat anyway. But do you know why we fear conservatives so much? It's because Roe showed us all that they fully intended, no matter how long it takes or how big the struggle, they fully intended to keep their promises to their voters. And right now, Trump and the Heritage Foundation are promising to make it illegal to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or anything other than cisgender, straight, and white. They intend to keep that promise unless the Democrats can somehow stop them, not with campaign speeches, but with legislation and packing the Supreme Court. They already outlined how exactly they're going to do it in a 920-page book. And if we fail to stop them, we will go down in history as the victims who let it happen again. Sure, the Germans back in the day said that they had no idea what that smell was down the road, or why their neighbors suddenly went missing, but we cannot claim incompetence to the same exact enemy with a similar manifesto. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool us twice, goodbye to our freedom. If you'd like to support our show, check out ProfessorPride.com for hundreds of ways to show off your pride, including LGBTQ books, magnets, pins, umbrellas, digital downloads, and more. And special thanks to our members and loyal subscribers who proudly support our work providing LGBTQ education and resources. Please subscribe or click on this video to watch more.